The head of the company asked the cleaning lady to pretend to be his wife at a dinner. But when she spoke, all the partners fell silent, and he couldn't contain his shock. Rick Quinzel reviewed the reports scattered across his desk as though searching, among those confusing figures, for some saving truth. The afternoon light filtered through his office windows, eliciting cold glimmers on the disorganized sheets he couldn't manage to classify. Phone calls piled up unanswered, and he, with furrowed brow, felt time pressing and certainties lacking. The upcoming meeting with Heritage, a unique opportunity to consolidate Quinzel and Associates' image, demanded clarity, reliable projections, and a flawless persona. But all he had were unstable data and the dull echo of internal pressures. He couldn't disappoint his board of directors or the investors, scrutinizing him with narrowed eyes, expecting solidity where there was only fog. A few minutes later, he entered the boardroom. The council's hard, calculating stares followed him with the same relentless insistence as always, judging him without mercy. They reminded him of the impending dinner with the Heritage Corporation, the key event in which they had to cement their reputation before demanding foreign partners. The problem, they pointed out bluntly, wasn't just the financial outlook, but also the human impression they conveyed. The company had to inspire stability and family values. The Quinzel name remained tied to Rick's father, a magnate whose shadow still clouded any attempt at credibility. Without a strong personal image, Heritage would likely distrust the ethics and accountability of the firm. And Rick's bachelor status, his lack of a harmonious home to show off, could jeopardize everything. He listened without interrupting, brow furrowed and jaw clenched, aware this pressure wasn't new, but had never been so pressing. When the meeting ended, he walked down the hallway, the echo of those demands ringing in his head. He passed glass walls and decorative planters, consumed by feverish reflection. Then he saw Helena, the cleaning lady, leaning over a window, wiping it with the patience of someone who understands the value of every little detail. Rick had barely noticed her before. She was discreet, nearly invisible in a world of suits, ties, and handshakes. No one would connect her to the corporate environment. No one would recognize her. That idea, initially a fleeting, crazy spark, began to take shape in his mind. Could he ask Helena to pretend to be his wife at the Heritage dinner? It sounded absurd, but the urgency of the moment made him consider any way out. As he walked away, the notion kept buzzing around his head, both unsettling and daring, opening an uncertain path toward the immediate future. Night had fallen on the city, and the dim lights in Rick's office barely lit the scattered reports on the table. Leaning back in his chair, he closed his eyes and mentally sifted through the women he knew. Ex-girlfriends, old friends, some fleeting acquaintance. None of them was viable. They were either recognizable, with a notoriety that would betray the facade, or belonged to circles close to the competition, or simply wouldn't agree to something so demeaning. Time was running out. The dinner with Heritage was closing in, and his image had to be impeccable. That was when the thought of Helena returned with greater force. Her discretion, her anonymity in the business world, her absence from the company's social sphere made her a perfect candidate. Could a cleaning lady accept such a thing? Without thinking too much, past midnight, Rick ventured into the service corridor. It was a place far removed from the executives, with the echo of distant footsteps and the smell of cleaning products. There she was. Helena was putting away brooms, cloths, and bottles in a metal cabinet. When he approached, she turned with a frown, surprised to see him there at that hour. Rick tried to speak, but the words came out awkwardly. He beat around the bush, hinting that he needed her help with a personal matter, without going into detail. Helena eyed him warily, more puzzled than offended. An uncomfortable silence settled between them, and without clarifying anything, Rick left, leaving only the faintest hint of a proposal in the air. A few minutes later, they crossed paths again in the small staff break room. It was a modest space with a table, chairs, and a kettle. Helena, tired, was sipping tea, trying to switch off from the day. Rick entered and closed the door behind him. In a halting voice, he finally dared to reveal the situation. He spoke of the dinner with Heritage, of the urgent need to present a family-oriented, trustworthy image. He admitted he was willing to pay a significant sum for her to pose as his wife that night. Helena, incredulous, blinked a few times, attempting to understand. Her first response was refusal. It felt degrading, almost like social blackmail. But then she remembered the unpaid medical bills, her grandmother's urgent surgery, her family's precarious situation. Rick's offer wasn't just money. It was a chance to solve a serious problem. Still, she refused to be treated like a mere ornament. Speaking firmly, she laid down her terms. Payment had to be provided up front, and it had to cover the cost of the operation. She would tolerate no humiliation or inappropriate insinuations. Rick, relieved by her acceptance, agreed without hesitation. A handshake sealed the agreement. Outside, the night went on, but in that tiny break room, they had forged a strange, delicate pact, laden with tensions, promises, and a future full of uncertainty for them both. Morning crept timidly through the window of the modest apartment, lighting up the kitchen's worn walls and a small table with a simple tablecloth. There, Andrea, Helena's teenage sister, bent over an exercise book, trying to concentrate amid daily hardships. On the nearby armchair, Grandma Olivia rested, her weak, persistent cough a constant reminder of the urgent surgery the family couldn't afford. Helena, standing by the stove, stirred a light soup, seeking comfort in the rising steam. Without luxuries or conveniences, that home was warm, a haven of caring and solidarity. Affection flowed among them despite the uncertainties hanging overhead, despite the scarcity of money and the need to work in silence to sustain their lives. After serving the soup, Andrea, frowning, asked why her sister didn't look for a better-paid job. It was clear that her intelligence and dedication far exceeded cleaning work. Helena, with a weary smile, explained that without formal degrees or connections, the job market had doors that were heavy and cold. Her self-taught knowledge wasn't enough to convince those who demanded papers and credentials. Andrea accepted her words, maturing in that instant, understanding without reproach the adversity that surrounded them. From the armchair, in a weak voice, Olivia urged her granddaughters to stand united against any storm. It was a modest yet valuable reminder. They needed each other, and love was enough to endure, though it didn't solve the immediate problems. That same night, when the city slept and the lights went out behind the curtains, Helena sat at a small table beside her bed, surrounded by yellowed books and old manuals on international finance. There were notebooks full of scribbles, underlined statistics, and diagrams of emerging markets. Her dedication was methodical, almost obsessive. Without teachers or classrooms, with the few resources of a self-taught learner, she'd built a solid understanding in secrecy. She knew the world was unfair, that her talent was hidden behind an apron and a cleaning cloth. Still, she kept studying, convinced that, when the unusual dinner with Heritage arrived, she wouldn't be caught off guard. Many might see her as invisible, but her mind shone with the tireless glow of knowledge. The next morning, in the remotest corners of Quinzel and Associates' back offices, Vanessa Williams was reviewing reports with an impassive expression that boded ill. Director of Internal Finance, she had a cold, analytical gaze capable of spotting anomalies in the flow of information and money at a glance. For days, she had sensed a shift in the atmosphere, an uncomfortable secrecy surrounding the upcoming dinner with Heritage, a silent tension emanating from Rick's office. He had grown distant, pensive, as if hiding something. Ever suspicious, Vanessa felt a prickling of doubt run along her skin, wondering what strange maneuver might be unfolding behind those pristine halls and polite smiles. Later, in the executive restroom, she ran into Andrei Miller, a young and ambitious analyst, the kind who would do anything to climb a few rungs in the corporate hierarchy. With her persuasive tone and carefully measured promises, Vanessa hinted that there was valuable information hidden in the files. If Andrei managed to find something substantial, she would pull strings in his favor. Swayed by those velvet-soft words, the young man, hungry for recognition, agreed without hesitation. He never realized he was stepping into a dangerous game. Convinced that his cooperation would earn Vanessa's admiration, he accepted. Thus began a pact of intrigue and clandestine snooping, yet another link in the growing chain of mistrust at Quinzel and Associates. That same night, as the city lights threw yellowish reflections on the streets, journalist Matt Dixon followed a rumor to meet with a former employee of the company. Under a flickering street lamp, the disgruntled, embittered man murmured hints of inflated figures, shady deals, and manipulations in the firm's internal management. Dixon, shrewd reporter that he was, realized this wasn't just some workplace grudge. There might be deeper rot in a firm that was trying to dazzle foreign investors. He walked away, troubled by his thoughts, suspecting that Quinzel and Associates' impeccable facade might be hiding skeletons in the closet. In the thick, silent night, suspicion spread like an ever-growing shadow over the company's reputation. In the bright afternoon pouring through the large windows, Rick had prepared everything in his office to coach Helena. In front of his desk, a laptop played videos on social etiquette and protocol. The task seemed straightforward, but tension crackled in the air. He explained in a gentle yet insistent voice how she should greet the guests, how to tilt her head slightly without seeming subservient, how to smile gracefully without looking stiff. Helena, seated with her back straight, felt the sting of being instructed in such a patronizing way. Her pride chafed at each correction, but she swallowed her discomfort, remembering why she was doing it. She needed the money for her grandmother's surgery. So she nodded silently as Rick tried to perfect even the most trivial details, never suspecting that the woman before him possessed far deeper knowledge than any makeshift hostess. A little later, Rick took her to an exclusive boutique. The saleswoman, a chatty and affable woman, greeted them, assuming at once they were a long-standing married couple. Unaware of the silent tension between them, she showed them high-fashion dresses, discreet jewelry, and heels seemingly crafted as precision tools to flatter the body's lines. Helena, amid silk and lace, swallowed her frustration. She felt like she was playing a hollow part, an actress forced into a dull script. The fine fabrics whispered against her skin in a cruel reminder of her charade. Yet, she didn't complain. She understood that without this elegant costume, she couldn't fulfill her end of the bargain. While the saleswoman rattled on about trends and seasonal colors, Helena kept her composure, though inwardly, the idea of faking a false identity gnawed at her. Upon leaving the store and driving back toward the company, Rick gripped the steering wheel tensely, rehearsing out loud the speech he intended to give at the dinner. He spoke of emerging markets, cited investment projections, and discussed growth models. His words formed a mosaic of data that, to less trained ears, would sound thoroughly professional. Helena, pretending indifference, watched the passing streets through the window, yet in truth, she listened keenly. As he recited figures, she picked up on gaps, contradictions, shaky information. Her serene, impassive gaze held a faint glimmer of understanding. She knew this territory well from her late-night reading, underlining statistics in old manuals. Rick had no inkling of the extent to which she could help make everything flawless. For now, remaining silent was her best strategy, letting him think he was guiding the situation while she prepared to surprise whoever needed surprising at just the right moment. In the cold, white light of the internal boardroom, uneasy outlines were etched on the directors' faces. Until a few weeks ago, the discussions with Rick had focused on balances, strategies, and the looming negotiations with Heritage. Now the appearance of a new female figure, Rick's supposed wife, had introduced an unexpected twist. Seated in plush chairs, amid the faint scent of polished wood, Rick maintained a seemingly relaxed posture. He smiled with careful elegance, striving to exude a confidence he didn't truly feel. When one of the council members, the one with rectangular glasses and the most incisive voice, asked about Mrs. Quinzel, that new unknown factor, Rick hastened to reply with rehearsed ease, "Everything's going well. She's very excited about the dinner, just putting the final touches on it." Yet his body betrayed him with small gestures, the rhythmic tapping of his fingertips against the table, quick glances toward the door, the nervous brush of his tongue across dry lips. No one called him out on it, but a pair of council members raised their eyebrows with thinly veiled malice. They didn't push further, but their silence spoke louder than any interrogation. Time was running out, expectations were mounting, and Rick felt the weight of his lie settling on his shoulders, heavier by the second. A few yards away, where the furniture was less ostentatious and the lamps less imposing, reality flowed through cramped cubicles divided by cold metal and glass partitions. Vanessa, with her impeccable bearing and calculated smile, approached Andrei in a narrow hallway. Her presence created a tense, almost claustrophobic atmosphere. Andrei, holding a notepad in one hand and looking pale, appeared on edge. So far, the information he'd gathered wasn't particularly revealing. Simple bureaucracy, small, irrelevant movements, nothing that exposed Rick's supposed ploy. Vanessa demanded more with few words, but a corrosive intensity. She wanted tangible information, something that could serve as a weapon. She reminded him that favors were repaid with loyalty and concrete results. Andrei swallowed hard. On one hand, climbing the corporate ladder meant meeting Vanessa's demands. On the other, he felt grimy, as though he was sifting through trash for no good reason. His ambition outweighed his moral qualms, at least for now, and he left with his head down, wondering how far he was willing to go just to earn a glance of approval from a woman who manipulated him so effortlessly. Meanwhile, away from the tense atmosphere of the offices, Helena walked through modest streets carrying a pair of bags. Inside them were the elegant dress and fine shoes she had accepted as part of her disguise. The city traffic sounded distant, and the worn pavement contrasted with the satin sheen of the fabrics she carried. Every step reminded her of her double life, a cleaning lady without formal credentials and, for one night, the wife of a nervous magnate. A moral unease stirred within her. How right was it to lie about her identity? She paused before the display window of a small bakery, gazing at her reflection with a hard look. She knew this was not just a harmless untruth. It could damage her dignity and taint her image if it all went wrong. And yet the potential good she could achieve with that money was too great. Her grandmother needed surgery that couldn't wait. Andrea depended on her to continue her studies, to have a better future. Was it not worth it to pretend for a single night, sacrifice a bit of pride, if it secured her family's well-being? With no clear answer, she pressed on, lifting her chin resolutely. She had accepted the conditions, and she had no right to hesitate now. Each one of them, Rick in his boardroom, Andrei in his stifling cubicles, Vanessa weaving intrigue, the council demanding their dose of apparent morality, and Helena, with a luxury gown in a humble neighborhood, was caught in a web of tensions that threatened to snap at any moment. Time was slipping away, anticipation for the grand dinner was becoming unbearable, and they all sensed that Quinzel and Associates' pristine facade was cracking, revealing flaws of deception, ambition, and need. Helena, with a firm stride and the bags in hand, was determined not to fail. If lying was necessary, she would carry it off with dignity. After all, in this hidden plot, she was the unforeseen piece that could change everything. Matt Dixon waited impatiently outside the building, blending with the crowd of hurried employees leaving, briefcases in tow, fixing their ties. The lobby reflected the lights from outdoors and the bustle of rush hour. That was when he spotted Helena. At first, he didn't recognize her. She was wearing elegant clothes, with a different poise than he'd seen the day before, when he'd glimpsed her from afar in her modest cleaning uniform. Her hair, once simply pulled back, now fell naturally over her shoulders, framing a serene face. Was it the same woman, or someone who resembled her too closely? His journalistic instincts raised the alarm. A supposed wife who appears out of nowhere, so different from the humble worker from a few days ago. Too many coincidences, too many questions flooding his mind. Curiosity burned in his chest. He needed to find out the truth, and the huge contrast between this woman's two images was the perfect hook for a story that promised to be both juicy and complex. Later, before returning to his newsroom, Dixon took refuge in a nearby cafe, an unassuming place scented with roasted coffee beans and soft-spoken conversations. Seated at a table by the window, he pulled out a notebook and pen, jotting down his observations. Helena, wife of the boss or employee in disguise, he wrote in capital letters. Beneath that, in more hurried strokes, he noted dates, descriptions of the woman in both contexts, and his initial impressions. Such a striking transformation couldn't be a coincidence. His fingers drummed on the edge of the cup, his gaze lost in the street as he tried to imagine a scenario that explained so much inconsistency. If there was a farce at play, if Rick Quinzel was trying to hoodwink Heritage, this could be the exposé to propel Dixon's career. However, he still lacked solid proof, only suspicions and gut feelings. A good reporter needed facts and concrete testimonies. As eager as he was, Dixon knew rushing things wouldn't help build a strong story. He had to dig with care, investigate until he found the hidden mechanism driving this seemingly mismatched piece in the Quinzel and Associates machinery. When night draped itself over the city, Dixon returned to his apartment, a small space crammed with papers, newspaper clippings, and half-catalogued photos. There, in the dim light of a single lamp, he dialed one number after another, contacting old informants, acquaintances, and former company employees. He asked about Helena. Did anyone know anything about her before she worked in cleaning? Had she studied anywhere? Did she have references or a backstory to shed light on the mystery? The answers were vague, but a pattern emerged. She was a discreet woman, free of scandal. Many confirmed she possessed an unusual intelligence, potential that had never been tapped. Some mentioned seeing her reading accounting manuals or economics books in her free time, as though cultivating hidden knowledge while polishing floors and windows. Although imprecise, these findings stirred a strange unease in Dixon. If Helena wasn't just a pawn, if beneath her facade lay a genuine intellect, why pretend to be Rick's wife? What kind of pressure had pushed her into such a charade? Everything hinted at a deeper dynamic, a personal drama that went beyond mere corporate maneuvering. Perhaps there was a human story behind it, a silent struggle to survive in a hostile environment. Maybe there wasn't only deceit and speculation, but also sacrifice, necessity, even nobility in such a peculiar lie. Dixon hung up the phone, pensive. He was no longer just after a scandal or flashy headlines. Something about Helena's story moved him, spurring him to look past the surface. That night, while organizing his notes, he couldn't stop thinking that between the cleaning uniform and the elegant dress lay a complex truth. To uncover it, he would have to follow both his instincts and his empathy. Soon enough, the curtain would be fully raised and he would be there, a witness to a mystery just beginning to unravel. The day had finally arrived, and in Rick Quinzel's office, the tension was almost tangible. Reports and slides were stacked on his desk in what seemed like orderly chaos. With slightly trembling hands, he tried once more to review the key figures and forecasts he would present that evening. The meeting with Heritage was the ultimate test. It would confirm Quinzel and Associates' solidity or cast doubt on its credibility. Just steps away, Helena watched in silence. She was still in her everyday clothes, waiting for the right moment to transform. Her serene eyes rested on Rick with a hint of empathy. She saw him biting his lip, adjusting his tie, going over every word he intended to say to the investors. In a soft, almost whispered voice, she suggested that if something went wrong, he should trust her. He heard her, but didn't grasp her meaning. In his mind, what could she possibly do beyond serving as his decorative wife? For Rick, Helena was just a strategic presence, a figure to complete his image before Heritage. He had no idea of the wealth of knowledge that lay behind her unassuming exterior. Moments later, in the makeshift dressing area next to his office, Helena took out the dress they had picked at the boutique. She laid it gently over a chair, then slipped her body into that refined fabric. She fastened the belt, checked the skirt length, and examined herself calmly in the mirror. It was an odd, almost ironic scene. A woman who had been cleaning windows and hallways was now stepping into elegant heels, wearing silk. In her reflection, she saw a face of determination tinged with subtle fear. The night ahead meant not only playing an uncomfortable role, but also risking scrutiny, arousing suspicion. She had to maintain composure, keep her perfect smile, and respond gracefully to any question. And if the ruse fell apart, Helena knew she had her own knowledge, what she'd gained in those late study sessions, to rely on. She promised herself she would not fail. Her family's future hinged on her success. When twilight dyed the sky in oranges and purples, Rick's car pulled up before a luxury hotel whose illuminated facade reflected the Heritage logo in majestic splendor. The street was relatively calm, the cool evening air carrying the distant hum of traffic, faint music, and the expectations of many awaiting them in the main hall. Rick got out first, straightening his posture, striving to project the confidence he lacked. Then he opened the car door for Helena. She stepped out with a natural elegance, placing her hand firmly in his as if they were a long-established couple. Immediately, the contrast between her real life and her performance struck her as overwhelming. Arm in arm, Rick presented himself to everyone around as a self-assured man with a poised companion at his side. A solemn ambiance enveloped the hotel, charged with a peculiar electricity. You could almost feel the scrutiny of those waiting inside, the press, the partners, the directors. She imagined Vanessa's cold stare, Andrei's mounting anxiety, Dixon's sharp curiosity, the journalist who'd already detected inconsistencies. A world of searching glances awaited them in that ballroom. Helena's heart pounded a little faster, but she did not allow a single hint of uncertainty to show. She had to appear natural, unshakable. Taking Rick's arm softly, she raised her chin slightly and walked toward the building's entrance, meeting the bright lights, the muted conversations, and the waiting champagne glasses. That night, the mask had to stay firmly in place, but deep down, Helena felt a latent power. If things got complicated, if the investors asked something unexpected, or if Rick tripped over ambiguous figures, she knew what to do. It wasn't time to reveal that yet. For now, she would keep to the agreement, pretend to be the perfect wife, and smile discreetly. But beneath her studied calm, her gaze shimmered with the determination of a woman who wouldn't be sunk by mere appearances. If need be, she would surprise everyone, including Rick, who still had no idea how formidable his makeshift ally could be. And so, they walked into the opulent hotel, under the glow of golden lamps and the murmur of important voices. The door closed behind them, and an uncertain future spread out in all its possibilities before the final stage. In the hotel's main hall, the atmosphere was as taut as a held breath. Golden light from the suspended lamps gleamed on crystal glasses and silk tablecloths, casting elegant reflections on dark suits and understated dresses. Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix, Heritage's representatives, sat with impeccable posture, surveying their surroundings with measured eyes. They waited in silence, speaking quietly to one another with controlled gestures, while the staff made last-minute adjustments in a soft murmur. This was a night brimming with expectations for Quinzel and Associates. A handful of journalists moved about carefully among the guests, talking in hushed voices and silently noting every detail. Matt Dixon, in particular, kept his gaze sharp, notebook at the ready, determined not to miss a single thing. It was as though every corner of the hall stood on alert, senses primed for the slightest sign of weakness or unexpected revelation. Rick appeared unannounced, with Helena close behind. His back was a bit stiff, lips tightly pressed, as he tried to project a serenity he didn't truly feel. She wore a gown that mirrored the level of elegance required for the occasion, holding herself beside him with poised discretion. From the moment they showed up, whispers intensified. The story of this mysterious wife who had materialized out of nowhere had turned into a persistent rumor. Some guests raised their eyebrows in curiosity, others inclined their heads in greeting, holding back questions that hovered, unanswered, in the air. In the far corner of the room stood Vanessa, elegantly dressed and with an incisive expression, watching the scene with the barest hint of a smile. She was pleased to witness a moment in which tension might explode at any second. Not far from her, Andrei swallowed hard, unsettled, while Matt Dixon narrowed his eyes, sensing the emergence of a mystery he already deemed newsworthy. The evening began with the clink of glasses, and chatter subsided when Rick rose to deliver his welcome. Raising his glass, he tried to steady his voice, thick with nerves to sound confident. He spoke about strategic objectives and the promise of growth that Quinzel and Associates wanted to share with Heritage. Yet, as he went on, his words grew too generic. Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix, astute negotiators, weren't content with mere niceties. Politely, but with no lenience, they began posing direct questions. They wanted solid data on emerging markets, specifics on particular investment segments, numerical evidence to back up each promise. Rick tensed. His slides were visually appealing, but his forecasts lacked the solidity they demanded. Each question from Heritage's representatives was a subtle blow that pushed him to retreat. Meanwhile, from her corner, Vanessa raised her glass in a barely perceptible gesture, enjoying the young Quinzel's unease. She saw tiny beads of sweat forming on his brow, the stiffness in how he clutched his folder, the way his gaze wandered each time he had to give a more precise answer. A near-electric tension weighed on the hall. Each second of prolonged silence was like a knife cutting into the company's credibility. Rick licked his lips nervously, combing through data in his mind that he couldn't quite piece together, attempting to extricate himself with vague generalities. But Heritage wouldn't relent so easily. They were investing serious funds and demanded unshakable certainties. For a moment, time appeared to stand still, a single heartbeat suspended in mid-air, with stares crossing silently. Then the unforeseeable happened. Helena, who had remained in the background, quiet and calm, raised her voice. Not in a shout or an abrupt exclamation. Her tone was clear and assured, like that of someone who handles complex information without needing fanfare. With composure, she began answering the questions Rick couldn't. She spoke about emerging markets, but not vaguely. She cited specific numbers, analyzed international trends, and pointed out opportunities in regions almost no one was paying attention to. She suggested partnerships with local companies, outlined more flexible strategies that would allow Heritage to quickly adapt to changes in demand. Her words flowed naturally, without hesitation or glancing at any documents. She introduced a plan not found in the slides, but rooted in the insights she had gleaned from dusty books and late-night study sessions. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. All heads turned toward Helena. Where had this solid, on-point knowledge come from, especially in a woman who, until then, had presented herself as little more than a decorative spouse? The surprise was plain in the looks exchanged by Huang Li and Delacroix, who leaned forward, more interested than ever. Rick stood speechless, caught between relief and amazement. Matt Dixon gripped his pen, relishing the sudden twist in the story unfolding before his eyes. Vanessa frowned, unable to hide a grimace of displeasure at the brilliant intervention that saved Rick from disgrace. A reverent hush settled over the room following Helena's words, as though everyone needed a moment to process what they had just witnessed. In a matter of seconds, expectation yielded to astonishment, and astonishment gave way to a new sense of respect. This supposed wife had changed the course of the evening with a handful of intelligent, precise answers. The tension lifted, the atmosphere loosened, and a murmur of approval rippled through the room. In that instant, A certainty took hold. There was so much more to Helena than anyone had ever guessed. And as the entire room fell under the spell of her clarity and confidence, Rick realized, perhaps for the first time, that this forced arrangement with Helena could become the best move of his professional life. The surprise following Helena's intervention rippled through the hall like a shared heartbeat. For a few moments, people glanced at one another, trying to grasp what had just transpired. Until then, Huang Li had maintained a rather detached composure, but now his demeanor changed. He nodded thoughtfully, his calm evident. Meanwhile, Sophia Delacroix leaned forward, examining with keen interest this quiet, self-assured woman whose unexpected insight had brought luminous clarity to the conversation. When Delacroix applauded the viewpoint presented, commending its freshness and intelligence, a soft wave of admiration rose among the guests. Only moments ago, Heritage had been skeptical. Now the gates of their confidence swung open with an almost tangible click. A newfound strength emanated from Helena, solidly supplanting the initial tension that had kept Quinzel and Associates on the brink of discredit. To one side of the hall, partially hidden behind a cluster of executives, Vanessa and Andrei took in the scene with differing reactions. Vanessa, hands clenched around her wineglass, pressed her lips together in barely contained anger. Her hopes of seeing Rick stumble had collapsed spectacularly. That unforeseen contribution didn't just spare Quinzel and Associates from humiliation, it bestowed an unexpected intellectual authority on Helena, that unknown woman with no apparent credentials. Vanessa was sure there was more to this woman than met the eye. She wondered what kind of scheme Rick must have devised to track down someone so capable. Andrei, beside her, looked on in a daze. He had only ever seen Helena in passing, quiet hallways and trivial exchanges, yet now he saw her know-how changing the night's entire course. She was no longer just decorative, she was a genuine asset, a talent that could outshine any of the firm's bright degree analysts. He felt admiration, confusion, and even shame for never having sensed her potential. Unable to order his thoughts, Andrei remained silent, torn, reassessing his loyalties. As the evening wore on, the glasses emptied and conversations drifted to lighter topics, easing the tension that had marked the first part of the event. The Heritage representatives left in high spirits, promising a more technical follow-up meeting. The board of directors breathed easier, congratulating Rick with cautious gestures. From his corner, Matt Dixon scribbled feverishly in his notebook, knowing that a remarkable story had just been born before his eyes. No one left the hall feeling the same as when they'd arrived, and Helena's role was the key element in that change. Later that night, as guests began to disperse, Rick felt the need to speak with her alone. He searched for her among the dark suits and formal gowns until he spotted her on a side balcony of the hotel, gazing out over the city lights. The cool air soothed the heat of the ballroom and the stress they'd endured. Approaching quietly, Rick inhaled, positioning himself beside her at a respectful distance. For the first time, his voice sounded gentler, devoid of the arrogance or haste that usually marked it. He asked how she knew so much, where that knowledge that had salvaged the night, came from. Helena, without looking directly into his eyes, sidestepped the details with grace. She said she'd studied a great deal, always on her own, without the luxury of formal opportunities. That was all she needed to say. Her tone wasn't modest or proud, simply honest. In that moment, he understood that beneath the wife disguise lay a mind cultivated in secrecy, an intellect no one had ever given the chance to shine. The realization moved him in an unexpected way. What had once been just an uneasy deal, an exchange of interests, now hinted at genuine respect, even a spark of shared understanding. Night enfolded them as they looked out over the illuminated city. The echoes of laughter and chatter, the faint music, and the distant clinking of glasses all drifted behind the ballroom doors. They needed no further explanation. An unspoken connection united them at that moment, speaking of gratitude, surprise, and mutual intrigue. Rick felt an odd sensation of thankfulness and fascination in the face of this new dimension Helena revealed. She, for her part, felt relieved to have succeeded, to have shown she was no mere prop in this story. A silent link now bound them, a thread of comprehension promising to upend the rules of the game and pave the way for a more equitable relationship, one less based on appearances and more on the inherent value each of them possessed. The lingering echo of applause and fading murmurs still drifted through the hotel's main hall, even as the last fragments of the evening dissolved. Heritage, pleased with Helena's intervention, decided not to finalize the deal before delving into the technical details behind the solid impression she had made. Smiling with satisfaction, Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix approached Rick and formally invited him to a follow-up, more technical meeting at Quinzel and Associates' offices. The proposal was clear. They needed certainty, precision, and an even more detailed outlook before committing to a major investment. Rick, still stunned by the night's favorable turn, paused to take in their request. Only minutes earlier, his hands had trembled slightly when holding his laptop. Now, they remained steady as he nodded in appreciation. He thanked them for the opportunity with a smile that barely concealed his relief and astonishment. With cordial yet professional tones, Huang Li remarked on how impressive his wife's contribution had been, acknowledging that Helena had greatly enhanced everyone's overall perception of the project. Sophia, her gaze keen and observant, added that rarely did she encounter proposals so fresh and clever in the competitive world of international investments. Clearly, thanks in large part to Helena's unforeseen brilliance, the doors to Heritage's investment were swinging open by the minute. While Heritage quietly celebrated the night's success, in a dimly lit hotel hallway, a shadow of discontent and frustration moved silently. Vanessa Williams, Quinzel and Associates Director of Internal Finance, stood there alone, her thoughts dark, her gaze fixed on some indistinct point across the corridor. Helena's bright, self-assured presence had dismantled Vanessa's calculations and left her plan to see Rick fail in ruins. Her malicious smile had vanished, replaced by an expression of discomfort and pent-up anger. As she crossed the hallway, she came face to face with Helena, who was on her way back to her office carrying the final shopping bags from the boutique. The confrontation was inevitable. "Where did you get all that knowledge?" Vanessa asked sharply, her voice brimming with fury and suspicion. The question hung in the air, a direct challenge to Helena's composure. But Helena, maintaining the poise that had characterized her throughout the evening, revealed nothing. Her gaze remained steady, neither arrogant nor fearful, just a quiet resolve that only heightened Vanessa's frustration. Unable to pry out any easy answers, Vanessa felt her anger rise. Helena's intervention had not only sabotaged her plans, but also exposed a weakness in the internal structure of the company, one Vanessa believed she controlled with an iron fist. "You have no idea what you're doing, Helena," she muttered with contempt, spinning on her heels and leaving the hallway, determined to dig into the past of this woman who now posed a real threat to her personal ambitions. A shadow of suspicion settled over Helena, fueling Vanessa's resolve to unearth whatever danger lay behind that seemingly simple facade. In the car, a heavy silence reigned between Rick and Helena. Their ride home was marked by reflection and unspoken tension. Rick drove, lost in thoughts of the night's events, while Helena watched the city lights fade through the window. Words weren't necessary between them. A quiet respect had emerged from the storm of emotions they'd experienced. Rick, with a mix of gratitude and astonishment, marveled that Helena, a mere cleaning employee without formal credentials, had shown such courage and intelligence beyond anything he had imagined. The way she had handled Heritage's incisive questions had not only saved his presentation, but also opened the door to a recognition that went deeper than mere professional success. Helena, for her part, felt that night had become a turning point in her life. The possibility of genuine recognition and the certainty that her knowledge had finally been appreciated lent her a new perspective on the future. Although their arrangement had begun as a pact of necessity and desperation, it now seemed to be evolving into a dynamic of mutual respect and even a hint of complicity. Rick's earnest gaze conveyed that he recognized in Helena a value transcending any initial financial arrangement, appreciative not only of her favor, but also of the talent she had revealed. The city spread out before them like a mosaic of lights and shadows, reflecting the duality of their situations. One, trapped in the pressures and stresses of a company in crisis. The other, a woman with a keen intellect who had found an opportunity to shine in a world that had long denied her recognition because of her social standing. Both sensed that from now on, their paths were intertwined more deeply and meaningfully, beyond a simple business agreement. The night, with its starry veil and its apparent calm, bore witness to a new beginning for them both, where internal tensions and external expectations began to blend into a more complex and promising reality. As the car plunged into the darkness of the night, Rick reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of recognizing talent where one least expects it, and the fragility of appearances when confronted with real human ability. Helena, wearing a faint smile and a determined look, knew she had left an indelible mark on the company's internal structure and on Rick's perception of her. But she also understood that Vanessa's suspicions and boundless ambition still loomed over her future, foreshadowing challenges that would test the strength of this newly forged alliance. Their ride ended as they arrived at their respective homes, but the connection forged in the muted light of the hotel ballroom endured, nourishing a shared hope for a more honest and collaborative future. The echo of their decisions that evening reverberated in their minds, marking the start of a new chapter in both their lives, where inward conflicts and outward expectations would collide with the emerging truth of their unlikely but powerful alliance. Early the next morning, the Boulogne Informativo newsroom buzzed with its usual bustle. But Matt Dixon was unable to focus on the day's headlines or the floods of emails filling his inbox. His mind spun with the previous night's events, replaying each detail with a detective's thoroughness. Seated in his office, surrounded by stacks of clippings and documents, he feverishly revisited the notes he'd taken at the dinner with Heritage. His observations on Helena's flawless expertise, Rick's nervous gestures, and Vanessa's suspicious glances stood out amid the chaos. He could still picture Helena, that mysterious woman of modest origins who had seized everyone's attention with her surprising intervention, clear as day in his mind. Dixon knew he had more than enough material for a sensational story, the ruse of a supposed wife who was actually a cleaning employee with remarkable expertise. He could publish a headline exploiting readers' disbelief, revealing how Rick Quinzel had turned to Helena to salvage his reputation before Heritage. Yet something held him back from taking that final step so easily. A lack of key information made him doubt the solidity of his own narrative. Was it just a well-executed farce, or was there something deeper behind this apparent lie? He resolved to wait, feeling that vital pieces were still missing in the puzzle. That afternoon, Dixon's determination to uncover the truth led him to make several phone calls to Helena's former colleagues. He started with a university friend, Anna Maria, who said Helena had always been discreet and dedicated with an impeccable work ethic. She was always there when people needed her, but she never sought recognition, Anna remarked. Another call to Javier, an ex-co-worker from a cleaning company where Helena had once worked, revealed that even though she had excellent intellectual skills, she was never offered a promotion. It was obvious she understood complex accounting and finance concepts, but that had nothing to do with our department, Javier explained resignedly. Dixon was taken aback. Why had no one ever gambled on her before, he wondered. The testimonies were consistent. Helena had a hidden talent, a sharp mind that had never been given the chance to flourish in a formal work environment. Some sources mentioned that, despite not holding a university degree, she possessed a wide range of self-taught knowledge in accounting and finance, accumulated through long nights of study and personal commitment. She was the kind of person who didn't fit the usual mold, but who had immeasurable value when offered the right opportunity, one contact said. With every call, Helena's portrait became more complex and intriguing, She wasn't just a cleaning employee who had agreed to pose as Rick's wife for money. She was a woman with a past marked by sacrifice, intelligence, and a constant fight to get ahead in a world that repeatedly shut its doors on her. The story Dixon had in mind was shifting, gaining a depth that went beyond a mere corporate deceit scandal. Back at his cubicle, Dixon paused in front of the photo he'd taken of Helena during the dinner. He had captured her at that pivotal moment, her bearing calm and her gaze steady, reflecting both determination and nervousness. "What's really going on between her and Rick?" he asked aloud. Why had she decided to fake a marriage? What kind of pressure or need had driven her to accept such an arrangement? He couldn't ignore the sense that a human drama lay behind the corporate facade, a story that deserved to be told in all its nuances. Dixon studied the photograph, enveloped by doubts and questions. Should he focus on the scandal of the ruse or delve into Helena's personal story, her struggle, her hidden talent, and the injustice of a system that denied her the opportunities she merited? For the first time, he contemplated being more than a mere journalist chasing sensational headlines. Maybe, just maybe, there was a more valuable lesson about merit, redemption, and truth behind the superficial veneer of a company in turmoil. The decision didn't come immediately, but a firm resolve began to take shape in his mind. Dixon knew he had to tread carefully, investigate in depth, and truly understand the relationship between Helena and Rick. This was not just a story of corporate trickery, it was an account of how a talented, dedicated woman had managed to stand out in adverse circumstances, and how a man, under immense pressure, had discovered in her an unlikely ally to save both his reputation and that of his firm. As he organized his notes and began outlining his next article, Dixon felt a blend of responsibility and empathy toward Helena. The story he was about to tell had the power to change lives, expose injustices in the corporate world, and highlight the significance of hidden talent that often goes unrecognized. He decided to wait for the outcome of Heritage's second meeting, knowing that each new piece of evidence would enrich his story, enabling him to tell a complete human story that resonated far beyond a flashy headline. Thus, with a fresh perspective and renewed resolve, Matt Dixon closed his notebook, turned off the office light, and prepared for the next chapter of his investigation. He knew the truth lay hidden among shadows of deception and appearances, and he was determined to uncover it, not just for his career, but for the justice Helena deserved. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the clock on Rick Quinzel's office wall chimed just as a sealed envelope bearing Heritage's letterhead arrived on his desk. Rick studied it closely, his pulse quickening at the prospect of what it might say. It was a formal invitation to a follow-up technical meeting, this time at the Quinzel and Associates headquarters. Excitement and fear intertwined within him. If he brought Helena along, the risk that the subterfuge might be exposed rose exponentially. Yet if he chose not to include her, Heritage might interpret her absence as a sign of disinterest or insecurity, jeopardizing the investment he so badly wanted to secure. Holding the envelope in his hands, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. It was no easy choice. On one hand, Helena's presence had been vital to the success of the previous dinner, revealing a capability and expertise he hadn't known she possessed. On the other, the possibility of that facade crumbling under Heritage's scrutiny gnawed at him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but his doubts wouldn't vanish, amplified by uncertainty about what the future held. Meanwhile, in Quinzel and Associates' internal cafe, Helena sat alone with a hot cup of tea, savoring a brief respite amid the day's clamor. She had spent the previous evening quietly proving her worth through her intervention at the dinner with Heritage. Now she allowed herself a moment of calm, aware that her performance had left a positive impression that could open new doors for her within the company. The comforting aroma of the tea enveloped her, offering her a brief instant of serenity before what might become another day laden with expectations. It was then that Marina, the project manager, approached with a kind smile. "Helena, I just wanted to congratulate you on how wonderful you looked last night. "You really brought an elegance that perfectly complemented the presentation," she said, unaware of the truth behind the role Helena was playing. Helena smiled gratefully, feeling a mix of relief and pride. "Thank you, Marina. I'm glad I was able to help," she replied, maintaining her composure and concealing the real motives for her elegant appearance. Their conversation continued on trivial topics about ongoing projects and upcoming meetings, but Helena noticed how Marina's words reinforced the idea that despite not being formally recognized, her talent was beginning to be appreciated by her superiors. By the end of the workday, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Rick emerged from his office, the heritage envelope still in hand, and headed toward the building's exit. Bracing against the cool evening breeze, he crossed the street to a small plaza with wooden benches, a place he often visited to reflect and disconnect from the corporate whirlwind. There, he found Helena waiting on a solitary bench, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Rick sat down next to her, a mixture of nerves and gratitude stirring within him. "Heritage wants a technical meeting," he began, his voice trembling, barely audible above the distant murmur of the city. "They want to dive deeper into the figures and plans. They're interested, but they need guarantees that everything is in order." He looked to Helena, seeking a sign of support. "I know that taking you to the meeting increases the risk of them discovering our ruse, but if we don't, they might lose interest and pull out their investment." Helena nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Rick, the technical meeting is an opportunity to prove Quinzel and Associates' solidity. It's not just about appearances, but about reassuring them we genuinely know what we're doing. If you decide not to bring me along, Heritage might see it as a lack of transparency or confidence. Still, I know the risks. If you trust me again, I can significantly contribute to the presentation, showing not just a personal image, but also the professionalism and knowledge that the company needs to secure this investment." Rick took a deep breath, weighing Helena's words. What began as a necessary arrangement had evolved into something deeper. "Are you willing to do this again?" he asked, the hope in his eyes unmistakable. "Yes," she replied firmly. "But this time, with a stronger foundation. We won't just fake a relationship. I'll also contribute my knowledge and skills so that the technical meeting is a complete success. I'm certain we can pull it off together." Rick nodded, feeling a renewed sense of resolve. "Thank you, Helena. I truly appreciate it. This is our best chance to move forward." Their exchanged glances reflected a mutual respect born from tension and necessity. They both knew the fate of the company and their own lives rested on the upcoming Heritage meeting. In silent agreement, they rose from the bench and headed back toward the building, fully aware that the next step would be critical to their shared destiny. Walking side by side toward Quinzel and Associates, determination gleamed in their eyes. Despite the risks and internal strife, they knew they had a unique chance to transform not only the company, but also their own lives. Rick, still anxious, felt newly confident with Helena at his side, not merely as a facade, but as a valuable ally endowed with knowledge he himself lacked. Helena, for her part, realized her role had transcended mere financial necessity. She was beginning to earn true recognition within the company, opening the door to a more promising and respectful future. Night stretched out before them, laden with possibilities and challenges. The second meeting with Heritage would not only test their ability to maintain the charade, but also offer an opportunity to display Quinzel and Associates' true strength, driven by the talent and determination of those ready to fight for a better future. That evening, Helena's modest apartment was steeped in quiet restlessness. The faint glow of a table lamp barely dispelled the shadows dancing on the worn-out walls. In the tiny dining area, Andrea, her teenage sister, was gently holding Grandma Olivia's hand, her breathing increasingly labored, her frail cough echoing in the cramped space. Helena, brows furrowed and worry etched on her face, flipped through a folder of medical quotes, figures, and bills that told the unforgiving truth. surgery costs were steep, and time to gather the necessary funds was slipping away. Though tension hung in the air, their profound familial bond revealed itself in subtle gestures and compassionate looks. Helena knew she couldn't keep resorting to ruses and half-truths to support her family. She needed a permanent solution, a proper job opportunity that let her provide for her loved ones without sacrificing her dignity or values. Stacks of medical bills and Andrea's desperate hopes of continuing her education weighed on her mind, urging her to seek an honest, sustainable way forward. Later that same night, as the household grew silent and only the ticking clock marked the passage of time, Helena made a crucial decision. She stood up from the dining table, shut the folder with determination, and headed to Rick's office. She knew that this conversation might change the course of both her life and the company. Upon arriving, she found Rick, papers strewn about his desk, working with the same intensity he had shown in recent days. The cold glare of the desk lamp lit his documents, establishing a backdrop of formality and professionalism that clashed with the emotional urgency welling inside her. Helena drew a deep breath before speaking, her words laced with seriousness and resolve. "Rick, we need to talk," she said firmly, shattering the silence that filled the office. Rick looked up, taken aback by the gravity in her eyes. Wasting no time, Helena continued. "Before the next meeting with Heritage, I need not only the payment we agreed upon, but also a position within the company that matches my abilities and expertise. I proved my value during the dinner, and I think it's time to make my contributions official, so we don't have to rely on deception or uncomfortable deals to move forward." A lump formed in Rick's throat. He had underestimated Helena's true value, seeing her only as a decorative wife. Her words struck deep, challenging the narrative he'd built so far. "Helena, I understand what you're asking," he finally answered, his voice subdued by suppressed emotion. "I've never questioned your talent, but right now I'm worried about how we can make this work without jeopardizing the company's reputation." His hands shook slightly as he fumbled for the right words. "Rick, we've already seen what I can do. This isn't just about maintaining an image for Heritage. It's about genuinely strengthening Quinzel and Associates with the knowledge and strategies we now know work. I'm not merely asking for a job, I'm asking for a real chance to contribute in a meaningful, sustainable way," Helena insisted, her gaze locked on his, conveying both urgency and confidence. Rick nodded slowly, grasping the magnitude of her request. It was time to re-evaluate his approach, to see Helena not just for what she could accomplish at a dinner, but as the genuine potential she represented for the company. "I'll think this through carefully, Helena. I recognize that this is an opportunity for both of us, for you and for Quinzel and Associates. I just need time to figure out how to structure things in the best possible way," he replied, feeling a mixture of relief and responsibility. Helena accepted his answer with a grateful smile, still aware of the challenges ahead. She understood that earning legitimate recognition and a suitable role wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was the only sustainable way to care for her family without compromising her values. Leaving Rick's office, Helena found herself in a quiet, dark corridor. Her steps echoed across the silent hallway, accompanied by the reverberation of her own thoughts. She leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath and letting the evening's decisions settle in her mind. She had crossed an important threshold, from a hidden cleaning employee to someone demanding a rightful place in the company. Determination glinted in her eyes, tempered by a touch of fear of the unknown that lay ahead. Yet the hope for a new future, one where her intelligence and hard work would finally be recognized, kept her moving forward. Helena knew this step was pivotal. Not only was she fighting for her grandmother's health and her sister's future, but for her own dignity and the right to be valued for who she truly was. With each step she took toward the exit, she felt the weight of responsibility ease a fraction, replaced by a renewed sense of self-assurance and a glimpse at the possibilities the future might hold. Night cloaked the city in shifting lights and shadows, mirroring the dual nature of their realities. one person struggling to survive in a world that denied her opportunities, and the other trying to redeem a company only just beginning to acknowledge its true potential. Helena walked with her head held high, fully aware the road to recognition and redemption would be long, but also certain that every effort would bring her closer to a fairer, more promising future. After Helena's startling presentation, Quinzel and Associates' office had been left in an uneasy hush. As the guests dispersed and conversations waned, a darker scheme was brewing in the building's shadows. Vanessa Williams, the Director of Internal Finance, watched with mounting determination how Helena had undone her plans. Her cruel smile hadn't vanished. If anything, it had sharpened with every step Helena took towards saving the company. Resolved to neutralize Helena and restore the ironclad control she so valued, Vanessa decided to enlist Andrei Miller, an ambitious junior analyst whose loyalty was no more than superficial. She knew Andrei, eager for promotion and recognition, would be easy to manipulate. One dreary afternoon, Vanessa led him to a secluded corner of the offices, a musty storage room long forgotten by most employees. The place smelled of old paper and stopped time, making it a perfect hideout for clandestine plots. "I need you to do something for me, Andrei," Vanessa said firmly, her eyes brimming with urgency and malice. Andrei, hands clammy, heart racing, nodded without hesitation. Vanessa handed him a thick folder stuffed with the company's financial documents. "We need to prove that Helena is involved in financial misconduct. This is crucial if we're going to get rid of her once and for all." A knot formed in Andrei's throat. He knew what Vanessa was asking was a blatant lie, a forgery that could ruin a woman who had proven to be an invaluable ally. Yet fear of jeopardizing his position and his desire to win Vanessa's approval held him back. With trembling hands, he set about falsifying the document, altering figures and creating discrepancies that, according to Vanessa, would prove Helena's guilt. Hours later, forged document in hand, Andrei returned to the same secluded spot. Vanessa received him with a wicked grin, snatching the paper with a look of smug satisfaction. "Perfect," she said, inspecting the document with an approving gaze. "This is exactly what we need to discredit her before the board and heritage. Well done, Andrei. I knew I could count on you." Vanessa's satisfaction was palpable as she took in her handiwork, while Andrei left with a heavy heart, painfully aware of the harm he was causing. The weight of his conscience began to tighten around him, but fear of the fallout kept him submissive, trapped in a web of intrigue and forced loyalties. Late that same night, as the city lights began to go out, Andrei found himself walking along a dark, deserted hallway in the company's building. The echo of his footsteps resonated through the silence, mirroring the turmoil churning inside him. That was when he saw Helena, carrying a few bags of paperwork, her posture as dignified and calm as ever. Her face showed no hint of arrogance, only an honest fatigue that spoke of long hours and constant effort. Andrei froze on the spot. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away, ashamed. The sight of Helena, so dedicated and unblemished, struck him hard. He felt a remorse he could no longer ignore, a voice inside telling him that what he had done was wrong. Yet fear of losing his position and Vanessa's influence kept him paralyzed. He had no idea how to face her, whether he should even try. Guilt gnawed at him from within, but the reality of his actions held him fast in a cycle of indecision. As Helena passed by, Andrei couldn't help but admire her more profoundly. Her presence exuded a strength and integrity he himself lacked. He watched her disappear down the hallway, leaving behind a trail of respect and dignity. That image etched itself into his mind, a constant reminder of the line he had crossed and the uncertain path he now had to walk. In the stillness of his thoughts, Andrei began to question his own loyalties and decisions. He knew he ought to do the right thing, but the chains of fear and ambition kept him bound. The intrigue Vanessa had sown was about to unleash a chain of events that would test not only Helena's integrity, but his as well. In that dark night, Under the weight of his own actions, Andrei stood at a moral crossroads that would define his future and that of Quinzel and Associates. The looming shadow of betrayal and internal conflict echoed with every step he took, while Vanessa's scheming and Helena's fortitude began to intertwine in a dangerous dance, one where loyalties would be challenged and the truth, at last, would have to come to light. The next morning, Matt Dixon woke with renewed determination to uncover the truth behind Helena's enigmatic figure. His journalistic curiosity, combined with growing empathy for her personal struggle, drove him to venture into her neighborhood. The trip took him through modest, tranquil streets, where the unassuming facades of small houses and the distant hum of daily life contrasted sharply with the corporate world of Quinzel and Associates. This simple environment reflected a reality in which daily sacrifice and family solidarity were essential pillars. Dixon stepped out of the taxi and walked slowly along the neatly kept sidewalks, taking in every detail. The houses were small but well maintained, with tidy gardens revealing their inhabitants' pride in their homes. The calm of the neighborhood embraced him, momentarily drawing him away from the bustle and tension of the corporate building. He stopped in front of a white-painted house with lace-curtained windows, Helena's home, where she lived with her family. Notebook in hand and a discreet camera slung around his neck, Dixon felt ready for the task that lay ahead. He approached the door and, wearing a professional smile, rang the bell. After a few seconds, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a ponytail and a curious gaze appeared in the doorway. It was Andrea, Helena's sister, who eyed him with some distrust. "Good morning," Dixon greeted warmly. "I'm Matt Dixon, a journalist from Bologna Informativo. I've heard wonderful things about your sister, and I'd like to ask her a few questions, if that's all right." Andrea hesitated a moment, evaluating the sincerity in Dixon's eyes. At last, she nodded and invited him in. The interior of the house was just as unpretentious as the outside, simple furnishings and humble decorations reflecting a close-knit family of limited means. Grandma Olivia rested nearby in an armchair, wrapped in a blanket that barely concealed her frail, pale figure. Andrea led Dixon to the living room, where their conversation began to unfold. "Helena has always been an incredibly hard worker," Andrea began, her voice tinged with both love and concern. "Ever since we moved here, she's spent countless hours cleaning at the office, and by night, studying to improve her finance and accounting skills. She's never liked asking for help, but now, with Grandma's health deteriorating, she really needs our support." Her eyes welled with tears at the mention of Olivia, and Dixon felt a pang of sympathy hearing her story. Andrea went on, describing the family's hardships, the mounting medical bills, the urgent surgery that her grandmother needed, and the constant pressure to keep Andrea in school, where her dreams of becoming an engineer seemed to recede further and further under the family's financial constraints. "Helena's done everything possible to keep us afloat," Andrea said with conviction. "Her intelligence and dedication are astounding, but without a real opportunity in the workplace, she's barely able to cover even our basic needs." Dixon jotted down notes attentively, capturing every detail that might enrich his article. "I see," he replied. "Could you tell me a bit more about how Helena's been handling all this? Has she sought any kind of assistance or had any chance to progress professionally?" Andrea let out a deep sigh before responding. "She's tried many times to get a better paying job, but without a degree or strong references, it's nearly impossible. So many employers refuse to take someone seriously who doesn't have a formal education, no matter how capable they are or how much they've learned on their own. Helena spends her free time reading economics books, attending online seminars, learning everything she can to improve her skills, but it just isn't enough in today's competitive world." Dixon nodded, understanding the scale of the challenge Helena faced. "How has the family responded to this situation? Have you considered other ways of raising the money for the surgery?" Andrea glanced at Grandma Olivia, now dozing peacefully in her armchair. "We've tried everything we can think of. We save every penny, sell things we no longer need, and even look for help from charitable organizations. But none of that has been enough. Helena promised she'd do whatever it takes to find the money, even if it means taking on roles she wouldn't normally consider. Hearing Helena's story, told with such honesty and heartbreak, reaffirmed Dixon's sense that there was far more to this supposed corporate masquerade than met the eye. This wasn't just a story about some sham investment deal. It was a testament to resilience, a determined woman trying to save her family by facing adversity with dignity and hard work. After exchanging a sincere handshake and thanks, Dixon took his leave of Andrea, leaving behind a lasting impression of compassion and respect. As he walked away from the house, the image of Helena tirelessly working to care for her family remained in his thoughts, reminding him that every story has layers and that the truth often runs deeper than what appears on the surface. On his way back to the newsroom, taxi windows framing the passing streets, Dixon mulled over all he had witnessed. Conversations with neighbors, and Andrea had painted a far more human, complex portrait of Helena. This was not simply a corporate deception to secure investments. It was the story of a woman who, in spite of her hardships, had never lost her integrity or her determination to improve her family's life. The human dimension of it moved him more than he expected, causing him to reflect on the ethics of his own investigation. Watching the city slip by outside the taxi, Dixon promised himself he would tell the story in all its depth, aiming not only for headlines, but also for the complete truth and a genuine portrayal of Helena's struggle. He knew he held a rare story in his hands, one that could inspire people and shed light on the injustices faced by those who, despite talent and dedication, can't seem to find the opportunities they deserve. Arriving at the newsroom, Dixon felt rejuvenated and resolute. He wouldn't rush to condemn or craft easy headlines. Instead, he would commit to thorough, respectful research, determined to understand the story from every angle before presenting it to the world. Helena deserved to be seen not as a mere cog in the corporate machine, but as a fully dimensional human being, someone with aspirations, obstacles, and an admirable courage. As he organized his notes and began outlining the first draft of his piece, Dixon couldn't stop thinking about Helena's tenacity and integrity. The story he was about to tell would not only underscore the flaws and manipulations within Quinzel and Associates, but also celebrate the fortitude of a woman who was fighting for her family and her dignity in a world that too often overlooks people's true worth. Filled with a sense of responsibility and empathy, Dixon knew his next article had the power to change lives and expose a deeper, more meaningful truth than any trivial scandal could offer. Seated at his desk, the dawn's first light filtering in through the windows, Dixon had a clear vision of what he needed to do. This wasn't just a story to grab headlines. It was an opportunity to amplify the voice of a courageous woman and to challenge the structures that perpetuate inequality and prejudice. With determination, he dove into his writing, mindful that Helena's complete and human truth deserved to be told with the utmost integrity and respect. That morning, a solemn hush spread through the Quinzel and Associates boardroom. The pristine white walls reflected the natural daylight streaming in through the windows, while the dark wooden furniture lent an air of elegance and formality. Every last detail had been carefully arranged for the crucial technical meeting with Heritage, a gathering that would likely define the company's future. Rick and Helena arrived punctually, their faces betraying a mix of nerves and resolve. Upon entering, they spotted Heritage's representatives, Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix, already seated, poring over the printed documents in their polished portfolios. Tension in the room hovered like a tangible presence. Heritage, renowned for its meticulous and demanding nature, was sure to leave no detail unexamined. Rick sat at the head of the table, with Helena right beside him, ready for anything. The boardroom doors closed softly behind them, signaling the start of what would be a pivotal meeting. Huang Li, Heritage's lead representative, broke the silence with a calm yet authoritative voice. "Thank you for receiving us today. We're here to delve more deeply into Quinzel and Associates' numbers and strategic plans. We want to ensure our visions are aligned and that our investments rest on a solid foundation. Sophia Delacroix nodded, flipping through a report with near-surgical precision. We'd like to begin by discussing your outlook on new international strategies. Which markets do you believe offer significant synergies with our current divisions? Rick stepped up and launched into a presentation projecting slides that detailed growth projections and market analyses. Yet as he continued, his voice became more and more rigid, and the confidence he strove to convey seemed to dissolve under Heritage's incisive questions. That was when Helena spoke up. With a calmness that stood in stark contrast to Rick's tension, she rose from her seat and addressed the Heritage representatives. "Allow me to continue the presentation," she said, her voice clear and confident. "I'd like to focus on how our strategies can adapt to the varied economic cultures in each region and on the importance of forging strong relationships with small local businesses that understand both the market terrain and real demand." Helena walked forward decisively, and every word she spoke revealed her deep understanding and genuine passion for the subject. She explained in detail how to diversify risks, the opportunities for sustainable development, and the relevance of corporate social responsibility in earning prestige and acceptance across international markets. Her knowledge was impeccable, and her ability to convey complex ideas in an accessible way impressed everyone in the room. Rick looked on in amazement as Helena handled every question with a precision and confidence he had lost. Every one of her answers not only addressed Heritage's concerns, but also offered innovative, well-founded solutions that showcased genuine strategic leadership. After Helena finished speaking, Sophia Delacroix exhaled deeply, admiration evident on her face. It's unusual to find someone without a directorial title who can handle such complex topics with such breadth and accuracy, she said, eyeing Helena with newfound respect. In my experience, I rarely see that blend of rigor and creativity. Huang Li likewise nodded, wearing a faint, thoughtful smile. We're not here to question whether Helena has the right credentials or not, he affirmed. What impresses us is her ability to think globally and adapt strategies to different economic contexts. Her contribution has sparked an interest Rick hadn't managed to ignite on his own. Heritage's reaction was immediate and unanimous. The room, once steeped in tension and anticipation, buzzed with murmurs of approval and astonishment. The Heritage representatives exchanged satisfied glances, recognizing the undeniable value Helena had brought to the presentation. Upon leaving the conference room, Rick and Helena lingered in the hallway for a moment, while the Heritage team took their leave with formal courtesies. The corridor's cool air contrasted with the warmth of the boardroom, offering a brief respite from the intensity of the meeting. Rick turned to Helena with a genuine smile, a gesture reflecting deep gratitude and admiration. "Helena, your intervention was invaluable. Without your help, we wouldn't have gained Heritage's confidence. You truly turned things around for the better," he said sincerely. Helena responded with a warm smile, feeling a surge of thankfulness and a new sense of belonging in the company. "Thank you, Rick. I'm glad I was able to contribute. I knew I could make a difference." In that instant, the connection between them grew stronger, like an invisible thread of mutual respect and gratitude weaving itself into something more profound. Their relationship, initially based on a forced arrangement and desperate need, was evolving into a dynamic of genuine cooperation and mutual recognition. As they walked away from the meeting room, Rick felt a combination of relief and optimism. The second gathering with Heritage had not only secured the crucial investment for Quinzel and Associates, but also revealed Helena's true potential. Her input had been the catalyst that transformed a high-pressure, tense situation into an opportunity for growth and renewal for the company. Helena, meanwhile, experienced a sense of validation and purpose. For the first time, she felt her hard work and dedication were not only recognized, but also genuinely valued. She knew further challenges lay ahead, yet the evening of the meeting had sown the seeds of a new chapter in her professional and personal life. The meeting had been a resounding success, but also a turning point for all involved. Heritage now saw Quinzel and Associates as a company with refreshed leadership and undeniable talent, guaranteeing a solid, promising investment. Rick, by recognizing and appreciating Helena's contribution, began to shed external pressures and forge a more honest, stable relationship with his team. Thus, the night ended with a sense of accomplishment and hope. Quinzel and Associates was heading toward a brighter future, driven by Helena's intelligence and integrity, and by Rick's ability to recognize and capitalize on the true value a person can bring to an organization. The boardroom, witness to this critical transformation, was now the stage for a new era at the company, one in which internal tensions gave way and external expectations were exceeded. In the cramped personal cubicle of Andrei Miller, the atmosphere felt stifling. Its corrugated cardboard walls and the messy desk, piled high with papers and an old computer, reflected the dullness of his daily routine. Yet that afternoon, an unusual tension pervaded the space. Andrei clutched in his hands a thick envelope, the forged document he had prepared under Vanessa Williams's unrelenting pressure. His trembling fingers brushed the paper with a mix of fear and guilt. Every line he had altered, every figure he had manipulated, amounted to a betrayal of Helena's integrity, a woman he had grown to admire for her commitment and hidden talents. Andrei's mind buzzed with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, his desire to impress Vanessa, to climb the corporate ladder, and to earn her favor pushed him to proceed. On the other, the heavy burden of guilt strangled him, reminding him that he was about to destroy the reputation of someone who deserved no such fate. He wavered between fulfilling Vanessa's demands and remaining true to his own moral compass, a private battle that consumed him more every day. Seeking relief from his troubled thoughts, Andrei decided to hide out in the supply room, a little-used space practically forgotten by the rest of the staff. The hallway leading there was dimly lit, matching the darkness of his mood. Upon entering, the smell of cleaning products and stale paper wrapped around him, offering a strange sense of isolation. Leaning against the cold, tiled wall, he closed his eyes, trying to find clarity in the whirlpool of emotions gripping him. He recalled the praise he'd heard from Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix during the Heritage meeting. "Helena has shown undeniable brilliance," Sophia had said, smiling in approval. "Her ability to analyze and propose innovative strategies is exceptional." Those words echoed in his mind, reminding him that Helena was far from a mere employee. She was a professional with real, valuable skills. He remembered her speaking with passion and honesty, her face lit by her conviction. How could he justify bringing someone like that down? The ethics of his actions tormented him, making him question the legitimacy of what he'd done. His guilt weighed on him, making him feel smaller and more trapped between ambition and conscience. This is a moral crime, he thought, a part of him desperate to stand up and stop, but fear of the consequences held him in place. The dilemma was clear: go through with the plan to impress Vanessa, or abandon it and risk losing his position and his future at the company. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Andrei made a decision that would alter the course of his life. With a heavy sigh and a pounding heart, he left the supply room and headed for Vanessa's office. Every step echoed within him like the reverberation of his inner conflict. Upon arriving, he found Vanessa seated behind her desk, scanning documents with her usual cold, calculating look. Without daring to meet her eyes, Andrei held out the envelope. "Here's what you asked for," he said, his voice shaky as he tried to hide his regret. Vanessa took the paper with a cruel, approving smile, too detached to notice the silent despair emanating from him. "Perfect, Andrei. This is exactly what we need to proceed with our plans." "Well done," she replied, her icy tone deepening his guilt. Andrei nodded, but inside, a relentless battle raged on. He knew he had crossed a pivotal line, from ambitious employee to pawn in Vanessa's deftly manipulated power play. He couldn't stop his mind from condemning him for what he'd done, and part of him longed to confess everything, to cast off the burden of lies and manipulation. Walking away from Vanessa's office, The company's deserted hallway seemed endless before him. His footsteps echoed in the dark, accompanied by the turmoil of his thoughts. With each passing moment, the image of Helena grew clearer. Her quiet dignity, her ceaseless struggle to support her family. The memory of her honest smile and her determination plagued him, making him wish he could turn back time and choose differently. Andrei knew he couldn't live with such guilt, but fear of the consequences kept him stuck. The seed of the future confession his conscience demanded was already planted, and the weight of that decision would force him to confront a moral crossroads defining both his character and his fate at the company. In the silence of his walk back to his cubicle, Andrei reflected on ambition and integrity. He realized that his drive to get ahead had led him to forsake his principles, jeopardizing the reputation of someone who, in many ways, was far more deserving than the condemnation he was about to bring down on her. The memory of Helena, so upright and hard-working, lingered, reminding him of what truly mattered: truth, honesty, and human worth over material gain. Returning to his cubicle, he left behind the dark hallway and Vanessa's office, but carried with him an emotional burden he couldn't ignore. He knew the path to redemption would be steep, but also understood he would have to face it eventually. Helena's story could not remain buried beneath a fabricated lie. She deserved the truth and recognition of her true value. With renewed resolve, Andrei began to scheme how he might repair the damage he had caused, aware that his next move could change not only his life, but also Helena's, and possibly the course of Quinzel and Associates. That night, as the city lights flickered through the office windows, Andrei vowed to confront his own demons and find a way to redeem himself, hoping he would somehow summon the strength to correct his chosen path. Nightfall had come to Quinzel and Associates, cloaking the building in shadows and silence. Seated alone at her desk in her pristine, subdued office, Vanessa Williams studied the contents of the envelope Andrei had handed over with trembling hands. Soft lighting cast reflections on her calculating face as she unfolded the falsified paperwork. Her eyes scanned the fake document with a mixture of satisfaction and contained cruelty. Each tampered line, every manipulated figure, was the perfect weapon to dismantle the spotless image Helena was building within the company. Vanessa placed the document on the table, allowing a cold, triumphant smile to surface on her lips. She had waited patiently for her moment, analyzing every move made by Helena and Rick, and now she held the ultimate tool to eliminate her competition. Armed with this document, she could sow doubt and provoke a scandal that would crumble Helena's reputation before Heritage, the board, and everyone else involved with the company. Wasting no time, Vanessa rose from her chair and headed to the boardroom, where the directors were already assembled. The board members, wearing tense expressions, their stares sharp, were anxiously awaiting any updates that might impact the recent meeting with Heritage. With icy composure, Vanessa approached the head table and spoke in a calm but suggestive tone. "I'd like to draw your attention to certain matters that have arisen recently, which may affect our perception of our current partners," she began, letting her words hang in the air without offering any specifics. "I've heard rumors about possible financial irregularities that could involve someone in our executive team. Though I don't have concrete evidence at this moment, I believe it would be prudent to investigate thoroughly to protect the honor and integrity of Quinzel and Associates." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their growing alarm and skepticism evident. Vanessa, with a barely perceptible smile, watched as uncertainty settled over the room. "It's essential we preserve a spotless reputation, especially now that Heritage is on the verge of finalizing their investment. We can't allow any hint of doubt to tarnish the confidence we've worked so hard to establish." With those parting words, Vanessa stepped back from the table, leaving an atmosphere heavy with suspense and worry. Board members looked at one another, silently questioning the veracity of her insinuations. A murmur of apprehension rippled through the room as they began to consider whether an investigation into these alleged irregularities was necessary. Vanessa, satisfied that she had planted the seed of doubt, left the boardroom feeling victorious, convinced her plan was taking effect. Meanwhile, in another part of the company, far from Vanessa's machinations, Rick and Helena were walking together down a quieter corridor, talking about plans for the future. The air around them was light and optimistic, strikingly different from the tension gripping the boardroom. Rick, wearing a grateful smile, turned to Helena. "Once the deal with Heritage is signed," he said, "I'll make your position official. I want you to have a title that really reflects your capabilities and the value you bring to the company." Helena's face lit up at those words, each step feeling like it carried her further from the shadows of anonymity and uncertainty. "Thank you, Rick," she answered sincerely. "This means a lot to me and my family. Knowing my work is recognized is exactly the push I need to keep going." They walked on, brimming with confidence, wholly unaware of the storm that was taking shape elsewhere in the building. Their relationship had evolved from a forced arrangement into genuine teamwork, founded on mutual respect and admiration for each other's skills. Rick felt grateful for Helena's role in the Heritage meeting, realizing that without her input, the company might well have faced serious hurdles in securing the pivotal investment. Yet fate had other plans. While Rick and Helena discussed strategies and their vision for Quinzel and Associates' future, Vanessa continued weaving her web of intrigue, determined to neutralize the single greatest threat to her place within the company. Her resolve was relentless, and she was willing to employ any means necessary to preserve her control and professional ascendancy. This dual reality within Quinzel and Associates was growing more stark by the minute. On one hand, the company was beginning to flourish thanks to Helena's intelligence and dedication. On the other, a conspiracy of deception loomed, one that threatened to topple everything they had built. The internal battle between truth and deceit, integrity and ambition was intensifying, setting the stage for an inevitable showdown that would decide everyone's fate. Time pressed on, and with every passing minute, Vanessa's scheme grew more perilous, even as Rick and Helena's connection strengthened, promising a future both honest and bright. But in the shadows, Vanessa's machinations continued their course, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the blow that would change everything. Thus, Quinzel and Associates found itself at a crossroads, torn between the brilliance of an unexpected ally and the manipulations of an ambitious director. The balance of power dangled precariously, and the next move would decide whether the company rose victorious or sank into the chaos of internal betrayal. Meanwhile, in the bustling newsroom of Boulogne Informativo, Matt Dixon was caught up in his daily editorial whirlwind. His office, located in the heart of the publishing building, was crowded with sticky notes, press clippings, and piles of documents reflecting the intensity of his daily grind. Centered on his desk was a photograph taken during the Heritage dinner, capturing the moment Helena made her impressively clear and precise intervention. Though unassuming, that single image symbolized a story far more complex and profound, one Dixon was on the brink of confronting. He knew he had a bombshell piece of news in his hands, revealing that the supposed wife of Rick Quinzel, a key figure in Quinzel and Associates, was actually a cleaning employee in disguise, had the potential to shake the company to its core and generate sensational headlines sure to capture public attention. He could write an exposé that capitalized on the public's shock, fueling the scandal and boosting newspaper circulation with bold, controversial front-page titles. However, throughout his investigation, his conversations with neighbors, his discovery of Helena's personal struggles, he had unearthed a far more complex, profoundly human story. What at first looked like a simple corporate deception revealed itself to be a tale of perseverance, sacrifice, and resilience. Leaning back in his chair, Matt stared at Helena's photo. The conflict inside him deepened. On one side, sensationalism was a golden opportunity to enhance his career, drawing readers hungry for shocking, dramatic stories. On the other, he felt an ethical obligation, a moral tug, prompting him to question whether exposing this ruse, no matter how misleading, was worth destroying a woman's reputation when her situation was so dire and her motives painfully real. In the hush of the newsroom, Dixon recalled the conversations he'd had with residents in the neighborhood where Helena lived. Each account described a dedicated woman working tirelessly to keep her family afloat, always ready to help those around her. Her ailing grandmother, Olivia, who badly needed expensive surgery, and her teenage sister, Andrea, whose future hinged on Helena's support, painted a picture of someone who, despite life's adversities, had never lost her dignity or integrity. Matt's inner monologue grew more intense as he recalled Rick's honest, vulnerable expression over the past few weeks. Perceptibly changed from the nervous businessman he once seemed, Rick was now displaying a genuine shift in behavior, an attempt at redemption or improvement. He no longer appeared brash and reckless, but rather someone willing to acknowledge and reward Helena's real worth. This added yet another layer to the story, making Matt question all the more the direction his eventual article should take. He fell into a deep silence, letting his thoughts tumble freely. The idea of destroying Helena and ruining her name, without fully understanding her history or motives, struck him as both unfair and cruel. On one hand, journalism demands the pursuit of truth and the disclosure of noteworthy facts, but on the other, he had to weigh the human consequences of his choices. Publishing the story in a way that solely spotlighted the ruse might bring him short-term career gains, but could also cause irreparable harm to someone who deserved recognition for her grit and sacrifice. After what felt like an eternity, Dixon arrived at a pivotal decision. He put away his notes and locked up the most sensational press clippings he'd gathered. He shut his laptop and carefully placed Helena's photograph into a special folder. Rather than rushing to publish a scandalous piece, he chose to wait and see how things would end. He understood the situation was not yet resolved, and that the story contained multiple facets worthy of careful exploration and deserved to be told fully and fairly. With a renewed sense of purpose, Matt prepared to attend the final event, where Heritage would sign its agreement with Quinzel and Associates. He had come to believe that beneath the veneer of deception lay a more valuable story, one about merit, redemption, and truth. Instead of mere sensationalism, he aimed to chronicle a deeper human complexity. After all, in the darkness of a trick or a lie, there may emerge the seed of genuine growth and well-deserved recognition. By waiting, by observing, he believed he could tell a more complete and meaningful story, one that not only exposed the scandal, but honored the perseverance and tenacity of a woman who had succeeded, despite the odds, in rising to the top. Leaving his desk with a mix of relief and resolve, Matt felt a new clarity of mission. This wasn't about chasing the loudest headlines, it was about understanding and portraying a narrative with lasting positive impact. As he headed out of the newsroom, he felt at peace with his decision. He had opted for integrity over sensationalism, for truth over expedience. He recognized that Helena's story deserved to be told in all its complexity, not rushed, not judged, but fully understood in context. With that conviction, he moved on to the next chapter of his investigation, ready to uncover and recount a story that transcended surface-level drama, a story about merit, redemption, and the genuine nature of truth. The sun was beginning to set when Quinzel and Associates' boardroom readied itself for the firm's most critical event, the signing of the contract with Heritage. The room, spotless, with white walls and dark wooden furnishings, exuded a solemn air. Every detail had been meticulously arranged to impress Heritage's delegates, known for their exacting standards. This day wasn't just about a large capital injection, it was also the cementing of a partnership that would shape the company's future. Rick Quinzel and Helena arrived right on time, accompanied by the board, Marina, Andrei, and Vanessa. Also present was Matt Dixon, the journalist who had chosen to hold off publishing the Helena exposé, watching each movement closely. The atmosphere was tense, with every person acutely aware of how significant this moment was. The Heritage representatives, Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix, were already seated, reviewing printed documents in their refined portfolios. A soft murmur of conversation drifted through the room, mingling with the clink of crystal glasses and the rustle of turning pages. All eyes were trained on the main table, waiting for the formal ceremony to begin. At last, Sophia Delacroix stood up, gesturing gracefully toward the document they were about to sign. "We're ready to proceed with the signing of the agreement," she announced in a firm, professional tone. Rick took his seat, followed closely by Helena, who maintained a calm, dignified posture, reflecting the growing confidence she had been cultivating over the past few weeks. Just as Sophia and Huang Li were about to affix their signatures to the papers, Vanessa Williams, her gaze cold with determination, rose suddenly from her chair. The envelope Andrei had given her earlier, the one containing the forged document incriminating Helena, slipped momentarily through her fingers. Without hesitation, Vanessa raised her voice, her direct and self-assured tone slicing through the air with a clarity that seized everyone's attention. "I must expose a fraud that has been unfolding here at Quinzel and Associates," Vanessa declared, displaying the forged document for all to see. "Helena is not Rick Quinzel's wife, as we were led to believe, but rather an employee who has deceived Heritage and this board of directors. This deception not only compromises our company's integrity, it also places our relationship with Heritage at risk." Absolute silence fell over the room. The Heritage representatives stared, wide-eyed with surprise and distrust. Board members exchanged worried looks, while Marina and Andrei stood frozen, unable to respond to Vanessa's accusation. Sophia Delacroix knitted her brow, her expression revealing a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. Rick felt a knot tighten in his throat. He knew he could no longer maintain the lie. That pressure and desperation had brought them all to this unsustainable point. His voice trembling, he rose from his seat, drawing a deep breath before stepping to the center of the room. "It's true," Rick admitted, his words heavy with emotion and regret. "Helena is not my wife. I chose to fake a relationship to project an image of personal stability for Heritage, afraid that without it, we might lose this crucial investment. The pressure was immense, and I feared any hint of instability could derail our efforts. But now, seeing Helena's integrity and talent, I realized that what we really needed was to recognize and appreciate her abilities, not hide them behind a facade." The tension in the room thickened as everyone absorbed Rick's words. Tears in her eyes, Helena spoke up next, her voice trembling yet determined. "My grandmother's surgery and my family's financial situation left me no choice but to go along with this charade. I had no other viable option at the time, but I want you to know that despite the circumstances, I've always been committed to this company and to contributing in an honest, meaningful way. The truth is, my ability to help Quinzel and Associates rests on my knowledge and dedication, not on a fabricated role." Heritage's representatives and the board members remained silent, amazed at Helena's candor and vulnerability. Sophia Delacroix was the first to break the hush, her tone revealing a blend of respect and thoughtfulness. "We appreciate your honesty, Helena," she said with a sympathetic smile. "We understand that circumstances can force difficult decisions, but genuine integrity and real talent matter more to us. We are prepared to continue our negotiations, this time based on the truth and on Quinzel and Associates' genuine capabilities." Huang Li nodded approvingly, a contemplative look crossing his face. "Transparency is essential to any successful business relationship. We're grateful for your honesty and prepared to give Quinzel and Associates another chance, relying on the merit and potential we've seen here today." Vanessa, though satisfied at having unmasked the deception, couldn't help a twinge of unease. Her plan had worked, but the impact of the truth had shifted dynamics within the company in ways she hadn't foreseen. Leaving the room, her cruel smile faded, replaced by a calculating look that hinted her intrigues might not be over just yet. With the tension in the room receding and Helena's value to the company now evident, Rick and she exchanged a new sense of mutual understanding and respect. The bond they had begun forging in the darkest moments only grew stronger, leading to a collaboration founded on honesty and integrity. Matt Dixon, present as a neutral observer, mentally took note of every word and action, aware that this story held layers of complexity and humanity. He realized that his article would not merely recount a corporate scandal, but also a story of struggle, redemption, and the true meaning of merit. As the meeting drew to a close, Rick and Helena approached the heritage representatives to discuss next steps, this time on a firm foundation of trust and respect. The signing of the agreement went forward with a renewed energy, reflecting both parties' commitment to building a promising and transparent future together. Leaving the boardroom, Rick took Helena's hand gratefully. "Thank you for your honesty and your courage," he said sincerely. "Without you, we would never have gained Heritage's trust. I'm dedicated now to granting you the position you deserve and to recognizing your real talent." Helena smiled, awash in relief and hope. "Thank you, Rick. I'm ready to contribute in a real, meaningful way. Together, we can take Quinzel and Associates to new horizons." Night fell with a sense of fulfillment and renewal. Truth had triumphed over deceit, and with it came a new era of openness and collaboration for Quinzel and Associates. Internal tensions subsided, clearing a path toward success, guided by the genuine skill and integrity of those at its helm. The atmosphere in the boardroom had shifted dramatically after Rick and Helena's confessions. Heritage representatives Sophia Delacroix and Huang Li exchanged looks charged with surprise and reflection. They paused, taking in the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. An intricate web of deception and redemption had emerged before their eyes, challenging their initial impressions of Quinzel and Associates. Sophia was the first to break the silence, leaning slightly toward Huang Li. "This is unexpected," she murmured, her voice conveying both astonishment and respect. "We wanted to confirm that Helena truly brought value to the company, and now it's clear her intelligence and dedication are genuine. The question is no longer whether she has talent, but rather how we handle the situation brought about by this facade we've all upheld." Huang Li nodded thoughtfully, regarding Helena with both admiration and caution. "Honesty is a cornerstone of any business relationship," he said, a seriousness in his tone underscoring the weight of the moment. Though the initial deception was harmful, Helena's ability to redeem herself and contribute so significantly demonstrates a real commitment to Quinzel and Associates' success. We need to decide on a fair, transparent path forward. While Heritage weighed these values, the atmosphere in the room turned increasingly contemplative. That was when Andrei Miller, overwhelmed by guilt, decided to break the silence that had trapped him in his own inner battle. With trembling hands clutching the forged document, he stepped nervously toward the main table. "I have a confession," he said in a low but steady voice, remorse shining in his eyes. "The document Vanessa asked me to create is entirely fake. She forced me to forge it to discredit Helena. It was a grave mistake, a betrayal of my own principles, and of someone who truly didn't deserve such harm." The room fell again into absolute silence, this time heavy with disbelief and repulsion. Vanessa Williams, who had maintained a dominant, icy posture until that moment, froze, unable to react to Andrei's admission. Her triumphant smile faded away, replaced by an expression of shock and smoldering rage. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed, her voice rife with disbelief. "You've betrayed everything we stand for. You have no right to defend your actions." The board members, already anxious about the company's integrity, looked at Vanessa in disapproval. "This only highlights the lack of ethics and professionalism you've displayed," one director said, voice stern with contempt for Vanessa's behavior. "We can't allow this type of internal scheming to keep jeopardizing Quinzel and Associates' reputation." With Andrei's confession, a new human tension filled the room. The board and Heritage now confronted a deeper moral dilemma. On one hand, they had just learned of an initial lie. On the other, they'd witnessed an act of redemption and candor that defied expectations of manipulation and deceit. Tears of relief and gratitude filled Helena's eyes, while Rick showed equal remorse and a resolve to own his role in the chaos. The final decision now rested with Heritage and the board. Once again, Sophia Delacroix spoke, her tone blending empathy with professionalism. "We recognize that mistakes and poor decisions were made," she said, addressing the entire room. "However, we also recognize the integrity Helena has shown, along with the sincerity of Rick's and Andrei's confessions. We believe this is an opportunity to learn and grow, reinforcing the transparency and honesty vital to any successful business relationship." Huang Li nodded in agreement, indicating that despite the complexity, the situation offered a chance to rebuild trust and restore Quinzel and Associates' good name. "We're willing to move forward with our investment, on the condition that strict measures for transparency and ethics are put in place. We need to ensure incidents like these don't happen again and that integrity becomes the backbone of our partnership." The boardroom, now the scene of a clash between deception and redemption, became a space for reflection and renewal. With a mixture of relief and accountability, Rick turned to Helena and Andrei. "I want to thank you for your honesty and for facing the situation so courageously," he said, his voice trembling with genuine emotion. "This experience has been a critical lesson for all of us, and I'm committed to ensuring Quinzel and Associates moves forward with the right principles, recognizing the true talent within our ranks." Moved to tears, Helena nodded in gratitude and hope. "Thank you, Rick. I'm ready to contribute honestly and meaningfully to the company's success. Together, we can overcome these challenges and build a future that's more transparent and equitable." The intricate dance of duplicity and redemption had reached its climax, ushering in a new era of honesty and cooperation at Quinzel and Associates. By valuing belated honesty and genuine merit over the initial lie, Heritage confirmed its commitment to a partnership founded on truth and due recognition of talent. Vanessa's betrayal had been exposed, and in its place emerged a chance to rebuild the company on stronger, more ethical ground. Andrei, freed at last from the guilt that had weighed on him, began his own path toward redemption, acknowledging the grave error he had made and seeking a way to repair the harm done. Meanwhile, Matt Dixon, the journalist who had chosen to wait for a more complete human story, looked on with satisfaction, watching truth and integrity triumph over scheming and reckless ambition. Quinzel and Associates, once ensnared in a web of deceit and internal tension, was now heading toward a brighter, more promising future, driven by Helena's genuine intelligence and devotion, and by Rick's willingness to lead with honesty and respect. The boardroom, witness to a crucial turning point, symbolized the rebirth of a company that had learned the valuable lesson that truth and integrity are the bedrock of any lasting success. In the span of just a few hours, the boardroom had seen a monumental transformation. Following the shocking revelations and confessions that shook the foundations of Quinzel and Associates, Heritage representatives Huang Li and Sophia Delacroix convened once again with the board and key company members. The room pulsed with a mixture of leftover tension and a renewed sense of hope. After a brief yet solemn discussion among themselves, Sophia Delacroix spoke up, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed space. After reviewing the recent events and recognizing the integrity shown by Helena, Heritage is prepared to move forward with our investment in Quinzel and Associates, Sophia announced, as everyone present held their breath, awaiting what she would say next. However, this investment comes with new conditions we consider essential to ensure the company's sustainable and ethical growth. We require a series of internal changes, including greater transparency in financial operations, the implementation of strict corporate ethics policies, and the creation of opportunities for emerging talent within the organization. The room erupted in murmurs and anxious glances as the board members took in Sophia's words. Sitting beside Helena, Rick felt both relief and resolve. He understood that Heritage's requirements were not only a validation of Helena's brilliance, but also a chance to rebuild the company on fairer, stronger foundations. Vanessa Williams, who had maintained a defiant stance until now, felt a blow to her composure as Sophia continued. We recognize the human potential at Quinzel and Associates and believe that, with the right reforms, the company can reach even higher levels of success. Helena has proven to be pivotal in this transformation, and we hope this investment marks the start of a new era for all of us." With those words, Heritage's decision was clear. They were willing to invest, but only if the firm adopted more ethical, transparent practices and promoted internal talent. A promise of a more promising, equitable future began to emerge for Quinzel and Associates. After the meeting, everyone's fate grew clearer. Vanessa, overly dazzled by her own scheming and frustrated by the collapse of her plan, was dismissed without hesitation. The severity of her act and the unethical methods she had used left an irrevocable mark on the board's opinion. As she walked out, her face showed barely contained anger and the bitterness of defeat, while the closing door shut away a shadow of corruption that would no longer find a place in the company. Andrei Miller, who had confessed his involvement in creating the forged document, received a stern reprimand from the board. However, instead of being fired, he was given a second chance to act with integrity and demonstrate his true worth. Although his confession came late, the board saw it as a brave, responsible act, allowing him to remain at the company under the condition that he abide by the new ethical standards being put in place. Marina, who had shown impeccable judgment and a steadfast commitment to justice throughout the entire ordeal, was named head of the internal reform process. Her role was crucial in steering the company toward transparency and fairness, ensuring the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated, and making sure emerging talent like Helena's was duly recognized and given the opportunities they deserved. Now humbled after facing the consequences of their previous decisions, the board accepted Heritage's demands with a mix of resignation and optimism. They recognized the pressing need to change and adapt for the company's long-term success, understanding that honesty and integrity were essential to keeping the trust of investors and business partners. Meanwhile, in the newsroom at Boulogne Informativo, Matt Dixon watched with satisfaction as events played out. He knew he had made the right call in favoring a deeper, more human perspective, veering away from quick sensationalism. His investigation had revealed a complicated plot filled with lessons about merit, redemption, and truth. Dixon was aware that his forthcoming article would not merely highlight the internal intrigues at Quinzel and Associates, but also shine a light on Helena's courage and integrity and the importance of recognizing and rewarding genuine talent in the corporate world. For his part, Rick felt immense relief, having taken responsibility and shown his vulnerability before both Heritage and the board. Facing the crisis with sincerity now allowed him to move forward with more honesty and openness, providing a firmer foundation for the company's future. As for Helena, she breathed deeply, knowing that the path to securing a dignified, well-deserved position at Quinzel and Associates had been cleared. The hard work and determination she'd poured in were finally being appreciated, opening doors to new possibilities and challenges for which she was more than prepared. The signing ceremony for the Heritage deal marked the start of a new phase for Quinzel and Associates. With internal changes underway and a restructured leadership spearheaded by Marina, the company re-emerged as a more ethical, transparent organization, committed to developing its internal talent. Newly recognized for her intelligence and commitment, Helena took on a role more in line with her abilities, making a significant impact on the company's growth and success. Vanessa's scheming had been dismantled, delivering a priceless lesson on the importance of honesty and integrity in business. Quinzel and Associates, wounded yet transformed, was forging ahead toward a promising future, driven by the employees' real intelligence and skill. The new moral and ethical regeneration promised to serve as the foundation for the company's path to sustainable success. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at Quinzel and Associates changed dramatically. The tension that once filled every corner had given way to a spirit of renewal and hope. A genuinely smiling, more at ease Rick Quinzel sat behind his desk, sifting through reports, when he decided that the moment had arrived to formally recognize Helena's invaluable contributions. "I'll call Helena right now," he thought, picking up the phone with resolve. After a few minutes, the line rang, and Helena's calm voice answered. "Hello, Rick," she greeted, a note of curiosity and anticipation in her tone. "Helena, please come to my office," Rick replied, no beating around the bush. He knew it was time to make her achievements official and grant her the opportunity she so richly deserved. A few minutes later, Helena arrived. The door closed quietly behind her, and they sat across from each other at a respectful distance, reflecting a professional, considerate relationship. "Helena, I want to thank you once again for everything you've done for Quinzel and Associates," Rick began, his voice warm and sincere. "Your intervention at the Heritage meeting didn't just safeguard our reputation, it also revealed the true potential of our company. Because of that, I'm pleased to formally offer you the position of strategic analyst." Helena felt a surge of emotion wash over her. Tears of gratitude filled her eyes as she absorbed Rick's words. "Thank you, Rick. You can't imagine how much this means to me. This promotion won't just help me support my family. It will also allow us to afford my grandmother's surgery and guarantee Andrea's education. It's a breakthrough we've dreamed about for so long." Rick nodded, appreciating the magnitude of what they were achieving together. "You deserve this acknowledgement, Helena. Your devotion, intellect, and work ethic set an example for us all. I'm confident that in your new role, you'll continue making remarkable contributions to our company's growth and success." Helena smiled in gratitude, finally sensing the stability and validation she'd long pursued. "I promise I'll do my best to meet your expectations, Rick. I'm committed to growing with Quinzel and Associates and making a real difference." Upon arriving home, Helena felt a rush of happiness and relief. Her hands shaking but resolute, she dialed her apartment's phone number. After a few rings, her sister Andrea answered, anxiety and anticipation thick in her voice. "Hi, Andrea. How are you?" Helena asked, trying to keep her composure. "Helena, what happened? Are you all right?" Andrea replied, clearly concerned. "No." Helena took a deep breath before delivering the good news. "I have something important to tell you. Rick offered me an official position as strategic analyst at the company. On top of that, it means we'll be able to cover Grandma Olivia's surgery costs and secure your education without any worries." Andrea's voice was instantly filled with joy. "I can't believe it. That's incredible, Helena. Thank goodness. This changes everything for us. Grandma can have her operation, and I can keep studying without fear." Overcome by joy, Andrea began crying tears of relief, hugging the phone as if she could feel the solace and hope Helena was giving her. "You deserve this so much, Helena. You've always been so strong and hard-working. I'm so proud of you." Helena, her heart brimming with emotion, felt that all her difficulties and sacrifices had finally been worthwhile. "Thank you, Andrea. We'll get through this together. I promise it'll all work out." Meanwhile, in the Boulogne Informativo newsroom, Matt Dixon sat at his desk, surrounded by notes, clippings, and the photograph of Helena at the Heritage dinner. He reflected on the story's remarkable complexity. At first, the idea of exposing the ruse seemed like an enticing, sensational headline, but his conversations with local residents and Helena's personal circumstances had revealed a reality far deeper and more human. Matt leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment to reflect. He recalled Grandma Olivia's vulnerability, Helena's tireless dedication, and the hidden talent that had finally emerged at a crucial moment. He also remembered the genuine look in Rick's eyes and the clear shift in his attitude, recognizing that late honesty and public redemption were elements that gave the story a weighty moral dimension. "This isn't just some corporate scandal," Matt thought, opening his eyes with renewed perspective. "It's a story about perseverance, merit, and redemption. Helena deserves to be recognized for her true value, and Rick deserves credit for his honesty." With fresh determination, Matt began writing an article that went well beyond simply exposing a hoax. His pen flowed with a mix of empathy and impartiality, portraying Helena's story as that of a woman who, despite adversity, had managed to stand out thanks to her intelligence and commitment. He described how Quinzel and Associates, facing an internal crisis, learned a valuable lesson about acknowledging and rewarding genuine talent and integrity. Matt's piece not only captured the drama and intrigue of the situation, but also encouraged readers to consider how both companies and individuals can grow and change through honesty and collaboration. He knew his report would leave a lasting mark, highlighting the lessons learned and celebrating the resilient spirit of Helena, as well as Quinzel and Associates' positive evolution. Quinzel and Associates, now stronger and more ethical than ever, pressed onward toward a promising future. The firm had emerged from a storm of deceit and betrayal, rebuilding itself on the pillars of truth, integrity, and genuine talent. With Helena officially at his side, Rick led the company with a renewed vision, emphasizing transparency and sustainable growth. Finally recognized for her worth, Helena realized that her relentless effort and dedication would not only provide for her family's well-being, but also open new doors for her and for the company. The connection between Rick and Helena, forged in mutual respect and sincere cooperation, promised to guide Quinzel and Associates toward new economic and ethical horizons. Matt Dixon, satisfied that he had chosen to tell a more complete and human story, knew he had done the right thing by revealing the protagonist's true essence. His article would not only make headlines, but also inspire others to value honesty and merit in their own lives and workplaces. And so the company, Helena's family, and Matt Dixon each began a new chapter in their stories, one defined by truth, redemption, and the promise of a brighter, more just future. Sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, filtering through the large windows of Quinzel and Associates' office. The golden light from the setting sun reflected on the dark wood furnishings, creating a warm, peaceful atmosphere. The office, now quiet and empty after the major negotiations with Heritage had wrapped up, turned into a tranquil sanctuary. Amid this calm backdrop, Rick Quinzel and Helena found themselves alone, aware that the moment had come to confront the emotions and truths they had concealed for so long. Rick, wearing a genuinely regretful expression, took a seat across from Helena, revealing the vulnerability he had tried to hide for months. "Helena," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to apologize sincerely. At first, I used you to impress investors, to create an image of stability I didn't really feel. It was a selfish, misguided decision, and I'm truly sorry." Helena listened quietly, meeting his gaze without a trace of arrogance, sensing the authenticity in his words. Her heart pounded, but she stayed composed, aware of the moment's importance for them both. Rick went on, "I've changed, Helena. I'm not the same man who asked you to pretend to be my wife to gain Heritage's trust. I've learned so much from all this, and I promise it won't happen again." Rick's words resonated in the stillness, filling it with a sincerity Helena had rarely seen in him. She sensed the transformation in front of her, a mix of remorse and genuine intent to make amends. Although it would take time to rebuild trust, the change was unmistakable and real. Rick, his eyes filled with admiration, added, "I don't just admire your intelligence, Helena. I admire your courage, your perseverance, and your generosity of spirit. You've faced so many challenges with grace and strength that genuinely inspire me. Over time, I've started feeling more than just respect for you, something deeper." With tears in her eyes, Helena heard the honesty and warmth in Rick's voice. At last, someone was recognizing her true worth and the tireless effort she'd poured into supporting her family and the company. "Thank you, Rick," she answered softly. "I know it hasn't been easy for either of us. I appreciate that you see how hard I've worked and that you're willing to change. There's still a long way to go, a lot for us to learn together, but I'm glad we're on the right path." In that moment, all the tension accumulated over so many months melted away, replaced by a deeper, more genuine connection. Rick gently took Helena's hand, and she did not pull back, meeting his gesture with a tender smile. The closeness forming between them was palpable, a reflection of the truth and honesty now guiding their actions. With determined eyes, Rick declared, "I want you to know that I'm formalizing your role as strategic analyst, giving you a position worthy of your abilities and recognizing your real talent. This is only the beginning of a new chapter for Quinzel and Associates, one where honesty and merit form the basis of our success." A surge of emotion washed over Helena at his words. She knew this promotion wasn't just about paying for Grandma Olivia's operation and securing Andrea's education, but also about a brighter, more promising future for her entire family. "Thank you, Rick. This opportunity means everything I've dreamed of and more. I'm ready to contribute meaningfully and ensure Quinzel and Associates grows with integrity and responsibility." In the hush of the now empty office, Rick and Helena held hands, sealing the start of something new, free of lies and filled with possibilities, with a gentle, delicate kiss. Outside, the illuminated city stretched out like a vast canvas of boundless opportunity, mirroring the promise of a future in which truth and merit shone above any superficial appearances. They both knew the path forward wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to build a fairer, more honest, and brighter future, not just for themselves, but for the company and everyone who believed in the power of human talent over empty facades. The sunset's light bathed the office, symbolizing the close of a dark chapter and the dawn of one filled with hope and renewal. Helena and Quinzel and Associates' story reveals that true strength lies in honesty and the genuine recognition of talent. Through her persistence and resilience, Helena proved that authentic effort is always rewarded, while Rick learned that leading with integrity is crucial for sustainable success. Vanessa's downfall and Andrei's confession serve as reminders that unbridled ambition and scheming can destroy reputations and relationships, yet the courage to face one's mistakes offers a chance for redemption and growth. A person's or a company's greatness is measured by its ability to confront the truth, value genuine skill, and act with integrity. In a world where appearances can be misleading, it's vital to look beyond the surface and appreciate true commitment and hard work. This story encourages us to be honest, to acknowledge the worth of those around us, and to build relationships based on mutual trust and respect, ensuring a more just and promising future for all. Thank you for following this captivating story. We hope each chapter inspired and entertained you as much as it did us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming adventures. Until next time, may truth and talent always light your way.